It's pretty fitting that we're doing this deep dive, right after World AIDS Day.
Yeah.
It just makes you think about, you know, the current state of this global HIV/AIDS epidemic even more.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, we've got all this data,
Yeah.
all these reports, both from the UN General Assembly and UNAIDS.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to unpack it all with you.
Yeah, it's a great time to think about it all and,
Yeah.
all the progress and the challenges still.
It is complex, right?
Yeah.
Because the UN actually declared the global response to HIV/AIDS a success story,
Mm-hmm.
which feels huge.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what makes it a success story?
Well, I think it comes down to some pretty big shifts.
Oh.
Since their peak, new HIV infections have dropped a lot,
Okay.
and AIDS-related deaths have gone down as well.
Okay.
2004 AIDS-related deaths hit their highest point,
Right.
but that trend has reversed in a big way.
Okay. That is huge.
Yeah.
But it's not just about, fewer deaths.
Yeah.
The reports also talked about antiretroviral therapy. Was that a big factor too?
Absolutely. Access to antiretroviral therapy has expanded like crazy,
Okay.
particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia.
Okay.
Millions more people are receiving these life-saving treatments.
Mm.
And speaking of incredible progress,
Yeah.
there's this inspiring example from Namibia.
Okay.
They've pretty much eliminated mother-to-child transmission of HIV.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
That feels almost impossible with everything we know about HIV.
It's true.
Wow.
And not only have they eliminated mother-to-child transmission of HIV,
Right.
but they've done the same for hepatitis B as well.
Really?
The statistic is unbelievable. 99% of children born to HIV-positive mothers in Namibia are HIV-free.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
powerful. What can be achieved with the right interventions and a strong healthcare system.
Yeah.
Like, that's a beacon of hope,
Yeah.
especially when so many of the UN's sustainable development goals seem to be struggling.
Yeah, it really shows you what's possible.
Yeah.
When you have global cooperation, scientific advancements, and
A commitment to tackling these health inequalities.
so inspiring.
Yeah.
But then you look at this UNAIDS fact sheet and it's like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
Some serious numbers here too.
Yeah.
Almost 40 million people globally living with HIV in 2023. And someone dying from HIV every minute?
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It reminds us that we've come a long way,
Yeah.
but there's still so much more to do.
Yeah.
We're actually off track to meet the target set for 2025.
Okay, so what were those targets?
Mhm.
How far off are we talking?
So the goal was to have less than 370,000 new HIV infections annually for 2025.
Okay.
But in 2023, we had 1.3 million new infections,
Wow.
more than 3 times the target.
Okay. A significant gap.
Yeah.
And what about AIDS-related deaths?
Yeah.
Was there a target for that too?
So for that, they were aiming for under 250,000 annually by 2025.
Okay.
But in 2023, it was 630,000 deaths.
So again, not where we need to be.
Right.
So what's going on here? Is
Yeah.
this about that funding gap? Yeah. It's a major factor.
Okay.
In 2023, there was a $19.8 billion funding gap.
Oh.
So Good Response needs around $29.3 billion,
Okay.
but only $9.5 billion was available.
Okay, so where does this funding usually come from?
Mm-hmm.
Is it mostly international aid or?
It's a mix of both domestic and international sources,
Okay,
but it's the drop in international funding that's a problem.
so break this down for me.
Yeah.
Why is this funding gap such a big deal?
Well, imagine if that gap keeps widening.
Right.
It puts everything we've achieved at risk.
Yeah.
Fewer people would have access to testing, fewer would get treatment, and
Why?
ultimately more infections and deaths.
Scary to think about.
Yeah, and it's not just a healthcare issue. It's
Right.
an economic issue, a development issue. It really touches on human rights.
Right. It makes you realize how interconnected this all is.
Yeah.
And that actually leads to the next thing I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
The fight against AIDS isn't the same everywhere. We can't just look at these global numbers
Yeah.
and assume everything's progressing evenly.
Yeah.
Didn't the reports highlight some pretty alarming disparities
Absolutely.
between different regions and groups?
Yeah, one of the starkest examples is the HIV prevalence rate in sub-Saharan Africa.
Right.
It's still the highest globally,
Okay.
and that points to a lot of complex factors.
Right.
Poverty, limited access to health care,
Mm-hmm.
even certain cultural norms.
Right.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's not a simple equation.
Nope.
Yeah, it's alarming to see how these broader societal issues
Yeah.
can actually fuel the spread of HIV.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also wondering about the human impact.
Yeah.
The report mentioned a really disturbing statistic about young women and girls.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to forget.
Do you remember that?
4,000 young women and girls are infected with HIV every single week.
Wow.
And most of those new infections are happening in sub-Saharan Africa.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what more can be done,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to empowering women and girls.
Well, there's a growing recognition that this goes beyond healthcare alone.
Okay.
We need to be looking at things like economic autonomy for women,
Right.
making sure they have access to healthcare,
Uh-huh.
and tackling the stigma and discrimination.
Yeah. It seems like the Netherlands representative at the UN really hit on that point.
Mm.
They talked about how these social and structural factors
Yeah.
create this cycle of vulnerability.
Exactly. And it's not just about women and girls.
Right.
The report also highlighted a higher prevalence of HIV in other groups.
Cool.
Gay men and men who have sex with men,
Mm-hmm.
sex workers, people who inject drugs, transgender people, even those in prisons.
Wow.
They often face stigma, discrimination, and even criminalization,
Yeah.
which creates obstacles to accessing prevention and treatment.
It's like a domino effect,
Yeah.
all these societal factors coming together
Yeah.
and making these groups so much more vulnerable.
Yeah.
So with all of that in mind, what can actually be done? How do we get back on track to ending AIDS as a public health threat?
Well, the UN General Assembly had some strong recommendations.
Okay.
They emphasize this idea of a multisectoral approach,
Okay.
basically recognizing that this isn't just a healthcare issue.
Yeah.
We need involvement from different sectors like
Okay.
education, economics, social justice.
Right. It's all connected.
Exactly.
That makes sense. But what does that look like in practice? How
Well-
do we start to address these broader issues?
One key area is strengthening health systems,
Okay.
especially in developing countries.
Okay.
We need to ensure access to affordable health care,
Right.
testing, treatment, prevention.
Right.
It all has to be accessible.
Because the healthcare infrastructure is crucial.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking about that point about stigma and discrimination.
Yeah.
How do we actually change those ingrained societal attitudes?
It's a long-term effort.
Yeah, it feels like such a huge hurdle.
It starts with things like education and awareness campaigns,
Okay.
promoting acceptance, advocating for policy changes that protect the rights of people living with HIV.
Okay, so it's about shifting that narrative
Yeah.
from fear and judgment to understanding and support.
Exactly.
Okay, and that leads to something else the report brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Community-led responses.
Yeah.
They seem to be getting a lot of attention lately.
Yeah.
What makes those responses so effective?
Well, think about it. Communities are closest to the issue.
Right.
They understand the challenges and
Yeah.
needs of their members better than anyone.
Right.
It's about empowering people living with HIV
Yeah.
and affected communities to take ownership of the response.
So it's about trusting those with lived experience to lead the way.
Exactly.
Okay.
They have the knowledge, the connections, and
Yeah.
the trust within their communities.
Right.
It's not about top-down solutions.
Yeah.
It's about those grassroots efforts that are tailored to the context.
It makes you realize how much we can learn from each other. That's why they were emphasizing South-South cooperation and technology transfer, right?
Absolutely. Sharing knowledge, expertise, and resources between developing countries is so important.
Yeah.
It helps build capacity
Yeah.
and strengthen their ability to respond.
So it's a global effort,
Yeah.
but it's also about recognizing the power of local solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But before we move on, I did want to touch on something
Okay.
that stood out to me in the UN discussions.
Yeah.
There were some differing viewpoints, right?
Right.
Not everyone agreed on everything.
While most nations called for unified global efforts,
Mm-hmm.
the Russian Federation representative did express some reservations
Okay.
about certain aspects of the UN report.
Okay. Like what?
The language used some of the approaches suggested.
Right, right. But we won't get into the specifics of those criticisms here.
Yeah,
It just highlights how complex this issue is,
it does.
especially when you're trying to navigate diverse cultural and political contexts
Yeah.
on a global scale.
It's a reminder that even with shared goals, you
Yeah.
know, the path to achieving them can be tough,
Yeah.
with challenges and disagreements.
Right.
It's about finding common ground
Mm-hmm.
and striving for a shared vision.
A world free from AIDS.
Exactly.
Wow, we've been on quite a journey with this deep dive
We'd have.
into the global fight against HIV/AIDS.
Yeah, it's incredible to see how far we've come.
It's a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance.
It really is.
But as we've talked about, the fight isn't over yet.
Nah.
There are still hurdles,
Yeah.
goals to reach, systems to change.
Mhm.
if we really want to see a world without AIDS.
For sure.
So it feels like this next chapter is
Yeah.
all about turning those what-ifs
Right.
into how-tos.
Right.
We know what needs to be done,
Yeah.
but how do we actually get there?
Right.
What are the most crucial next steps in this fight?
Well, we can't ignore the funding gap.
Right.
That's a major threat to the progress.
We talked about that earlier, and it's definitely unsettling.
Yep.
You know, if we're serious about ending AIDS as a public health threat by 2030,
Mm-hmm.
closing that funding gap has to be like the top priority.
Absolutely. It's going to require a renewed commitment
Yeah.
from both domestic and international donors.
Right.
We need everyone to step up and recognize that this is an investment worth making.
Yeah, and it's not just about the amount of money.
Right.
It's about using those funds effectively,
Exactly.
strategically.
We need to be smart about how we allocate resources. You
Right.
know, prioritize programs and interventions that are proven to be effective.
Right. And make sure the funding reaches the communities that need it most,
Yes,
the
exactly.
ones that are often marginalized and underserved.
Absolutely.
It's about equity and efficiency,
Yeah.
making sure every dollar has the biggest impact.
Right.
But even with enough funding,
Mm-hmm.
there's still the issue of access.
Yes.
We've got these amazing scientific advancements
Yeah.
like pre-P and long-acting pre-P,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not reaching everyone.
That's so true. Developing these tools is only half the battle.
Right.
The other half is making sure there's equitable access.
Yeah. Regardless of location or socioeconomic status.
Absolutely.
It makes me think about all the systemic barriers.
Yeah.
Poverty, stigma, discrimination,
Mm-hmm.
even just a lack of basic healthcare infrastructure.
Yeah. In some parts of the world, it's a big problem.
We need to address those underlying issues
Yeah,
if we want to see real change.
for sure.
You know, it's about dismantling those barriers
Yeah.
and creating a system
Mm,
where everyone has a fair shot at a healthy life.
exactly.
And speaking of systemic issues,
Yeah.
we can't forget about empowering women and girls.
Right.
We've seen how they carry a disproportionate burden of this epidemic.
Yeah, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa.
What more can be done to shift that dynamic?
We need to keep investing in programs
Okay.
that give girls education and economic opportunities.
Okay, so it's about giving them the tools
Yeah.
and resources to build independent lives and make informed choices about their health and well-being.
Yeah. And a lot of these interventions also focus on challenging those harmful gender norms.
Right, they contribute to their vulnerability.
Absolutely. We need to dismantle those harmful norms
Yeah,
and create a world where women and girls have equal rights and opportunity.
right. It's not just a moral imperative, it's a critical strategy
Yes.
for achieving our global health and development goals.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
We've talked a lot about equity and justice,
Yeah.
and it feels like they're at the heart of this fight.
They are.
We can't end AIDS without addressing those issues.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to stigma and discrimination.
Right.
It's a barrier
Yeah.
that keeps people from getting tested, accessing treatment, living openly with HIV.
But it's an invisible barrier
You know.
that keeps people in the shadows.
Yeah.
And as long as that stigma exists,
Right.
it's going to be hard to make real progress.
I agree.
It feels like changing hearts and minds is as important as developing new medications or prevention strategies.
It's a crucial part of the solution.
Yeah.
We need to keep pushing for more understanding and acceptance. Education is key.
Yeah.
And so is representation.
Right.
We need to see more positive portrayals of people living with HIV
Yeah.
in the media in our communities everywhere.
Yeah. It's about normalizing the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
breaking down stereotypes,
Yeah.
and showing that HIV doesn't define a person.
Exactly.
But this isn't just a fight for individuals, is it?
No, it's not.
It's a global effort
Yeah.
that requires collaboration on a massive scale.
It does. We need to work together.
So we need to foster greater collaboration and knowledge sharing.
Yes, we've seen what community-led responses can do.
Yeah.
And that needs to be a key focus moving forward.
It's about recognizing the power of local solutions and trusting communities to lead the way.
Absolutely. They're on the front lines. They have the experience.
Right. They know what works best.
Exactly. And we can learn so much from each other.
Yeah. Both within and across borders.
Yeah. Sharing best practices, supporting each other's efforts, working together.
It's amazing to think that what started as a deep dive
I know.
into some data and reports has become this exploration of humanity's capacity
It has.
for resilience, innovation, and compassion.
Mhm.
It's been heavy at times, but also really inspiring.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts
Well,
as we
yeah.
wrap up this deep dive?
I hope people come away with a sense of hope.
Yeah.
The fight's not over, but
Mhm.
we have the knowledge, the tools, and the will to make a difference. It takes effort, innovation, and collaboration.
Right?
But a world without AIDS is possible.
It's a powerful reminder
Yeah.
that even with huge challenges, humanity can come together to innovate and strive for a better future.
Absolutely.
As we mark World AIDS Day, let's remember the lives lost,
Yeah,
celebrate the victories, and recommit ourselves to this fight
I agree.
for a healthier, more just, and equitable world for everyone.